Story Station, episode 28. In this episode, you can listen to 2 Australian stories. The first story is titled, Wayambeh the Turtle. Did you ever wonder why turtles always hide in their shell whenever they get scared? If you have, this is the story for you. The second story is titled, Weeonibeens and the Piggybilla. Listen to this gripping story about how everybody is willing to kill just for one emu for dinner. Hope you enjoy it. I'll read a story called Wayambeh the Turtle. Oola the lizard was out getting yams on a myria flat. She had 3 of her children with her. Suddenly, she thought she heard someone moving behind the big myria bushes. She listened. All of a sudden, out jumped Wayambeh from behind a bush and seized Oola, telling her not to make a noise and he would not hurt her, but that he meant to take her off to his camp to be his wife. He would take her 3 children too and look after them. Resistance was useless, for Oola only had her yam stick, while Wayambeh had his spears and boondies. Wayambeh took the woman and her children to his camp. His tribe, when they saw him bring home a woman of the Oola tribe, asked him if her tribe had given her to him. He said, "No, I have stolen her." "Well," they said, "her tribe will soon be after her. You must protect yourself. We shall not fight for you. You had no right to steal her without telling us. We had a young woman of our own tribe for you, yet you go and steal an Oola and bring her to the camp of Wayambeh. On your own head be the consequences." In a short time, the Oolas were seen coming across the plain, which faced the camp of Wayambeh. And they came not in friendship or to parley, for no women were there with them, and they carried no boughs of peace in their bands, but were painted as for war, and were armed with fighting weapons. When the Wayambeh saw the approach of the Oola, their chief said, "Now, Wayambeh, you had better go out onto the plain and do your own fighting. We shall not help you." Wayambeh chose the 2 biggest boreens that he had. One he slung on him, covering the front of his body, and one in the back. Then, seizing his weapons, he strode out to meet his enemies. When he was well out onto the plain, though still some distance from the Oola, he called out, "Come on." The answer was a shower of spears and boomerangs. As they came whizzing through the air, Wayambeh drew his arms inside the boreens and ducked his head down between them, so escaped. As the weapons fell harmless to the ground, glancing off his boreen, out again he stretched his arms and held up again his head, shouting, "Come on, try again, I'm ready." The answer was another shower of weapons, which he met in the same way. At last, the Oolas closed in round him, forcing him to retreat towards the creek. Shower after shower of weapons they slung at him, and were getting at such close quarters that his only chance was to dive into the creek. He turned towards the creek, tore the front boreen off of him, flung down his weapons, and plunged in. The Oola waited, spears poised in hand, ready to aim directly his head appeared above the water, but they waited in vain. Wayambeh, the fellow they never saw again, but in the waterhole wherein he had dived, they saw a strange creature, which bore on its back a fixed structure like a boreen, and which, when they went to try and catch it, it drew in its heads and limbs. So they said, "It's Wayambeh." And this was the beginning of Wayambeh, or Turtle in the Creeks. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story. The next story begins in a moment. I will read a story called The Weeunibeens and the Piggybilla. two Weeumibeen brothers went out hunting. One brother was much younger than the other, and smaller, so when they sighted an emu, the elder one said to the younger, "You stay quietly here and do not make a noise, or Piggybilla, whose camp we passed just now, will hear you and steal the emu if I kill it. He is so strong. I'll go on and try to kill the emu with this stone." The little Weeumibeen watched his big brother sneak up to the emu, crawling along almost flat on the ground. He saw him get quite close to the emu, then spring up quickly and throw the stone with such accurate aim as to kill the bird on the spot. The little brother was so rejoiced that he forgot his brother's caution, and he called aloud in his joy. The big Weeumibeen looked around and gave him a warning sign, but it was too late. Piggybilla had heard the cry and was hastening towards them. Quickly, big Weeumibeen left the emu and joined his little brother. Piggybilla, when he came up, said, "What have you found?" "Nothing," said the big Weeumibeen. "Nothing but some mistletoe berries." "It must have been something more than that, or your little brother would not have called so loudly." Little Weeumibeen was so afraid that Piggybilla would find their emu and take it, that he said, "I hit a little bird with a stone. I was so glad I could throw so straight." It was no cry for the killing of a little bird, or for the finding of some mistletoe berries that I heard. It was for something much more than either, or you would not have called out so joyfully. If you do not tell me at once, I will kill you both. The Weeumibeen brothers were frightened, for Piggybilla was a great fighter and very strong, so when they saw he was really angry, they showed him the dead emu. "Just what I want for my supper," he said, and so saying, dragged it away to his own camp. The Weeumibeens followed him, and even helped him make a fire to cook the emu, hoping by so doing to get a share given to them. But Piggybilla would not give them any. He said he must have it all for himself. Angry and disappointed, the Weeumibeens marched straight off and told some fellows who lived near that Piggybilla had a fine fat emu just cooked for supper. Up jumped the fellows, seized their spears, bade the Weeumibeens quickly, and led them to Piggybilla's camp, promising them for doing so a share of the emu. When they were within range of a spear shot, the fellows formed a circle, took aim, and threw their spears at Piggybilla. As the spears fell thick on him, sticking out all over him, Piggybilla cried out, "Pingala, Piggybilla, you can have it, you can have it!" But the fellows did not desist until Piggybilla was too wounded even to cry out. Then they left him a mass of spears and turned to look for the emu. But to their surprise, they found it not. Then for the first time, they missed the Weeumibeens. Looking round, they saw their track going to where the emu had evidently been. Then they saw that they had dragged the emu to their nunu, which was a humpy made of grass. When the Weeumibeens saw the fellows coming, they caught hold of the emu and dragged it to a big hole they knew of, with a big stone at its entrance, which stone only they knew the secret of moving. They moved the stone, got the emu and themselves into the hole, and the stone in place again before the fellows reached the place. The fellows tried to move the stone, but could not. Yet they knew that the Weeumibeens must have done so, for they had tracked them right up to it, and they could hear the sound of their voices on the other side of it. They saw there was a crevice on either side of the stone, between it and the ground. Through these crevices they drove in their spears, thinking they must surely kill the brothers. But the Weeumibeens had seen these crevices, and anticipated the spears, so they had placed the dead emu before them to act as a shield. And into its body were driven the spears of the fellows extended for the Weeumibeens. Having driven the spears well in, the fellows went off to get help to move the stone. But when they had gone a little way, they heard the Weeumibeens laughing. back they came and speared again, and again started for help, only as they left to hear once more the laughter of the brothers. The Weeoomibeens, finding their laughter, only brought back the fellows to a fresh attack, determined to keep quiet, which, after the next spearing, they did. Quite sure, when they heard their spear shots, followed by neither conversation nor laughter, they had killed the Weeoomibeens at last. The fellows hurried away to bring back the strength and cunning of the camp to remove the stone. The Weeoomibeens hurriedly discussed what plan they had better adopt to elude the fellows, for well they knew that they should never meet any of them again. They would be killed without mercy. And as they talked, they satisfied their hunger by eating some of the emu flesh. After a while, the fellows returned, and soon was the stone removed from the entrance. Some of them crept into the hole, where, to their surprise, they only found the remains of the emu, and no trace of the Weeoomibeens. As those who had gone in first crept out and told of the disappearance of the Weeoomibeens, others, incredulous of such a story, crept in to find it confirmed. As they searched round for tracks, seeing that their spears were all in the emu, it seemed to them probable that the Weeoomibeens had escaped alive. But if so, whether they had gone their tracks would show. But search as they would, no tracks they could find. All they could see were two little birds, which sat on a bush near the hole, watching the fellows all the time. The little birds flew around the hole sometimes, but never away, always returning to their bush, seeming to discuss the whole affair. But what they said the fellows could not understand. But as time went on, and no sign was ever found of the Weeoomibeens, the fellows became sure that the brothers had turned into the little white-throated birds, which had sat on the bush by the hole. So, they supposed, to escape their vengeance, and afterwards the little white-throats were called Weeoomibeens, and the memory of Piggybilla is perpetuated by a sort of porcupine anteater which bears his name, and whose skin is covered closely with miniature spears sticking all over it. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story.
Thank you for listening to Story Station. We are adding stories as frequently as possible, so check back often. We would love to hear your feedback and any questions you may have. Thank you.